Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island, including the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Ojibwe peoples, and on lands connected with the Lake Simcoe Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818. This is the home of a diverse range of Indigenous peoples whom we recognize as contemporary stewards of the land and vital contributors of our society. And you will notice for all our residents watching online that a number of us are wearing green. This is a tribute to Mental Health Week, which is being put on by the Canadian Mental Health Association and the Children's Mental Health of Ontario. And if you want to get involved, you can shine a green light on your home or on your front porch, and you can also wear green and take a picture of yourself, post it on your social media with hashtags Get Loud and hashtag Kids Can't Wait. So we're all wearing green to support mental health in our community. And with that said, I will look for the adoption of the agenda. And I have that. So it is moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor McLeod, that the content of the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee agenda for May 6, 2020 be adopted as presented. And I will call the vote. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position as we move along, just let us know. Deputations, there are no deputations today, which takes us into staff reports. And item 5.1 is C 2020-6 2019 non-standard emergency purchases report. And I'm going to pass that over to Clerk Almas. But as I do, I also wanted to say a welcome to Jocelyn McCauley, who's our new accountability officer. Jocelyn started on March 23rd when we were under lockdown. And so many of us have not had an opportunity to meet Jocelyn. So this will be her first chance today. And so welcome, Jocelyn. And I encourage everyone, when we're under less structured restrictions, that everyone introduce themselves and welcome Jocelyn. So Sarah, with that said, I'll pass it over to you. Thank you.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. To members of the committee, this is the annual report. That's a requirement of our procurement bylaw to present any of the non-standard or emergency purchases that happened in the previous year. So Jocelyn has joined us in the midst of this pandemic. She has been extremely active, and we are very grateful to have her retained, because she's been a great benefit to Rose in our purchasing department, as well as with a few other corporate initiatives that we've been tackling during this remote working period. So with that said, I'll introduce Jocelyn. I believe she is here. If you want to turn on your video, and maybe Jocelyn, maybe before your presentation, if you can provide a little bit of a background about yourself.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Jocelyn McCauley. So as was said, I am the town's new accountability officer. I joined the town back at the end of March, and I'm here today to present the 2019 annual report on non-standard and emergency purchases and to answer any questions that you might have. So first and foremost, since this is my first time meeting most of you, albeit virtually, I wanted to quickly just provide a bit of background about myself. So before joining the town of Collingwood, I worked as a committee clerk at the Legislative Assembly of Ontario. In this role, I provided nonpartisan procedural and administrative support to members of provincial parliament, ministries, offices of the Assembly, and the general public. Much of my work as a committee clerk overlapped with similar functions to that of an accountability officer, especially with respect to nonpartisanship and accountable decision making. In addition, come June, I will be completing my master's in public policy and administrative law at York University. And this master's involved a thesis focused on developing a framework for evaluating the effectiveness of parliamentary officers in Canada. So outside of the context of a pandemic, you would typically find me on a ski hill or a soccer field, which is largely the reason why I chose to relocate to the town of Collingwood. And since joining the town, as Sarah has mentioned, I have worked hard to assist as many departments as possible in ensuring that town services and operations can continue with accountability and transparency in mind. So with that said, I will now move on to the report itself. You can go to the next slide. All right, so the impetus for this report is as follows. So back in 2017, the town's procurement bylaw was enacted and passed by council in accordance with section 270 of the Municipal Act. This bylaw outlines the circumstances under which non-standard and emergency purchases can be made by the town. It also requires that non-standard and emergency purchases be reported to the public annually to ensure openness, transparency, and accountability in the town's procurement processes. The report being presented today was prepared by the town's procurement officer, Rose Hewitson, in consultation with myself and other department heads. It details all non-standard and emergency purchases made in 2019 with a procurement value equal to or greater than $2,500. On a separate but related note, as part of the town's upcoming review of the procurement bylaw, we will be examining the procurement values associated with these emergency and non-standard purchases in order to determine whether or not the $2,500 threshold needs to be raised. Next slide. So first and foremost, I wanted to note that non-competitive purchases are a fact of efficient and effective programs in procurement at all levels of government. Under the definitions and governance section of Collingwood's bylaw, there are legitimate reasons to proceed with non-competitive procurement processes, and these are used judiciously. These reasons are going to be explored in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. So first, I'll begin by covering non-standard purchases made in 2019. The majority of purchases made by the town follow standard procurement processes. However, under certain circumstances, purchases may not fit into these categories and are therefore labeled as non-standard purchases. The circumstances under which non-standing purchases can occur are listed in Schedule C of the town's procurement bylaw and are also included in the next slide. So here you'll see a list of all of the circumstances under which the town can move ahead with non-standard procurements. So for example, these include circumstances where a standard procurement process was carried out, but no bids were received. It also includes circumstances where only one supplier was available to provide goods, services, or construction projects in order to ensure compatibility with existing services or town assets and to ensure the maintenance of existing products. It also relates to potential exclusive rights that may be affiliated with a specific project. Other reasons include the absence of competition for technical reasons or that only one supplier exists to actually deliver these services. It may also involve procurement where confidential matters or privilege matters are concerned. And I'll just continue on. Procurement of goods and services from a public body or nonprofit organization are also included, as well as the use of procurement through Ontario government's vendor of record program. It also includes circumstances that may be considered exceptionally advantageous or time sensitive. It also involves the procurement of any prototypes or research contracts. However, this is limited to simply the purchase of these prototypes, and then following this, standard processes must be followed. And then finally, it includes purchases that are financed primarily through donations. Next slide. So in 2019, there were 14 cases of non-standard purchases. 2 instances involved purchases that were carried out through a standard procurement process. However, it did not result in any bids. And an additional 12 purchases were made in circumstances where only one supplier was able to meet procurement requirements for various reasons. Next slide. A final note, sorry, before I move on to emergency procurement. Of the 14 purchases made, you will notice in the chart that 3 of these purchases were under $5,000, 7 were between $5,000 and $25,000, and 4 were over the $25,000 range. Next slide. So the procurement bylaw also covers emergency procurement. So emergency procurement, as listed on the slide, involves the purchase of any goods, services, or construction projects that are required on an emergency basis and come out of an unforeseeable situation or event that threatens public safety and health, the welfare of persons or public property, that is required to ensure the maintenance of town services and in order to limit any possible service disruptions, and also to ensure the security of the town's interests, financial or otherwise. Next slide. So in 2019, there were 19 reported instances of emergency procurement over $2,500. 5 of these purchases were made in response to emergency repairs required at Sunset Point. 4 emergency purchases were made while scheduled maintenance, which was already approved, was well underway. And finally, 10 emergency purchases were required in order to repair town assets and ensure that services were not disrupted and that health and safety of all residents and town staff were preserved. Next slide. On a final note, in the 2018 report, there were 2 instances of non-standard purchases that were directed by council and approved by council. These included the judicial inquiry as well as the Alwyn Gathering Place project. In 2019, there were no instances of council-directed procurement. Now, finally, based on the information contained in this report, the total estimated cost of all non-standard and emergency purchases was just under $750,000. And this included both non-standard and emergency purchases. And with that, that brings me to the end of my presentation, and I will turn it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn. A great report, very thorough. So thanks to Rose as well. And before I put the resolution on the floor for council to ask questions, I will look to the public to see if there's anyone in the gallery and the residents that would like to ask questions or comment on the presentation we just received. And I'll pass that over to you, Sarah, to monitor that for me, please.
Okay, we do have 5 attendees present, and no one at this point has expressed an interest to speak to this.
Okay, well, what I'll do then is get the item on the floor, and then council can ask questions. So it's moved by Councillor McLeod and seconded by Councillor Madigan that council receives staff report C 2020-6, 2019 non-standard / emergency purchasers for information. Are there questions or comments, council? Go ahead, Councillor Doherty.
Sorry. Thank you. I had 2 questions. There were 2 items under non-standard purchasing, one having to do with further study on the under foundation of the terminals, and the other having to do with replacement of equipment at Centennial Pool, both of which council approved an estimated amount, and the final price tag came in higher than what council had approved. So my question was, in this situation, should these items have come back to council given that the pricing was higher than what had originally been approved?
Thank you. I'll put that through to Jocelyn. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Councillor Doherty. So with respect to the 2 projects that you referenced, the first being the terminals project and the second involving the installation of drains at Centennial Pool. The terminals project was carried out by Fleet and Facilities, and in their operating budget, there's a line item for studies, and that was in the amount of $10,000. So in October 2019, this committee requested that additional effort be put towards determining the condition of wooden pile foundations, and as a result, council agreed to commit an additional $10,000 towards the study. So the department relied on this $10,000 and then chose to draw an additional $5,000 from the department's existing operating budget under the line item studies. With respect to the installation of drains at Centennial Pool, over the course of a retiling project at the Aquatic Center, it was found that drains needed to be reinstalled, and this required the additional expenditure of $32,500, which was asked of council and subsequently approved. As a result, the total cost of this installation, including materials and labor, was $52,563, and $21,000 approximately of that cost involved the use of parts and labor. And this money came from the department's existing budget. So that $32,000 that was granted was needed in order to account for the additional work that was required over the course of this project. And so then with respect to your other question about whether or not council approval is required, in these cases, there already existed money in the operating budgets of these departments in order to carry out these projects. And under section 15 of the bylaw, council approval is only required in situations where the bylaw is being waived. And in this case, both standard and non-standard purchases, along with emergency purchases, are covered by the bylaw and therefore don't constitute waiving the bylaw. Council may also be asked to comment or to discuss the matter if there's any irregularities or unresolved challenges in connection to any projects, or if council has indicated a particular interest in these projects and requires additional budget approval. However, in this case, departments were able to rely on their existing operating budget.
Thank you very much for that thorough answer, Jocelyn. Does that assist Councillor Doherty?
Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Are there any other questions or comments, Council? Seeing none, I have one, and I'll put this through to either Jocelyn, Sonia, or Marjorie. I just wanted to get an idea of the relativity. We've got around just under $750,000 in non-standard and emergency purchases. I'm wondering for relativity, how does that compare to the normal course in terms of our total purchasing over a given year? So we get an idea of what percentage of these purchases would be non-standard.
So this answer was provided to me before this meeting by Marjorie. I can pass it over to her if she would prefer to answer.
Go ahead.
I'm fine, Jocelyn, you can give them the answer.
Okay, so approximately $19 million was spent over this period, which with respect to non-standard and emergency purchases, these would account for approximately 4% of this amount.
Good. Okay. Thank you very much. If there are no other comments or questions, then I'm going to call the vote for receiving the report. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Jocelyn. And
Thank you,
staff
Your
for
Worship.
that.
Councillors.
So that takes us then to item number 6, consent agenda. And the motion is moved by Councillor Madigan and seconded by Councillor Berman. That the general consent agenda having been given due consideration by the standing committee be received. And item 6.1 is correspondence from the Township of North Dumfries Regional Government Review Report. And 6.2, Town of Kingsville electricity billing relief during COVID-19 pandemic. First I will call the vote, and then I will ask council if there's any items they want to pull on the 2 items there, the consent agenda. So all in favor of receiving the consent agenda? That is carried unanimously. Are there any items that anyone would like to pull? Seeing none, then we're going to move into departmental updates. And 7.1 is the Economic Recovery and Support Task Force update from Foster Williams, who is the vice chair. And I'm going to pass it over to Martin Ridlow of our Economic Development Center to introduce Foster and get this report going. Martin? Do we have Martin?
Yes, he should be joining us here momentarily.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mayor Saunderson and Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Excellent. It gives me great pleasure to introduce you to the efforts of the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force today. Before I do that, I did want to share an update on some immediate support actions that have already been underway. Chris, if you can just switch to the next slide, please. There's been a tremendous amount of work happening at the Business Development Center with members of staff, as well as the planning and building departments. For perspective, the Business Development Center partners represent a team of 9, including Small Business Enterprise Center, the BIA, and the Center for Business and Economic Development. As you can see on the slide, we've been really busy. We've been responding to inquiries. We've been sending out newsletters to keep people updated. We've hosted 18 different webinars reaching 1,300 people, and then also sat in on over 100 different other webinars from associations and organizations across Ontario and Canada to stay abreast of the latest news. We've been promoting the BDC services with radio spots and on-air shows, and maintaining a specific business recovery page at collingwood.ca. Just for perspective, that website is doing phenomenal stuff for the community. Over 50,000 page views, 70,000 page views just this month. So it's a tremendous resource that is being made available to the public and the businesses. We have specialists available for some of the key areas of concern related to HR, as well as digital marketing. Our social media is on fire, to say the least, with a reach of over 50,000 people just this month, promoting Collingwood Strong, as well as a number of other services that we've got, and including, of course, www.collingwoodcommons.com, which is an online marketplace for restaurants, stores, and other services. As you may have heard, the federal government is going to be releasing a new loans program that is managed through the Business Development Center partner, the Center for Business and Economic Development. And that's going to be a significant loans program coming forward in the next few weeks. And we're also going to be dispersing over $68,000 in provincial grants this summer and start a company entrepreneurship program. I should highlight a few things in this. First of all, those newsletters that are going out are in partnership with the Collingwood Chamber of Commerce, as well as our partners at the Business Development Center. And of course, the Collingwood.Business weekly updates, which we send out. And with social media, we do certainly use Experience Collingwood as a key channel, but the Town of Collingwood channel, led by our communications officer, Mr. Ferguson, has been doing phenomenal efforts with a reach of an engagement of over 5,000 every week, which is just tremendous. And also over 300 tweets just in this month. Last but not least, I did want to highlight our building department. They've been working extremely hard, and just in the month of April, through an innovative approach to doing building permits, have issued 52 building permits. That's only down about 25% from the same period last year, which is absolutely astronomical in terms of what that department is able to do. And the planning department, of course, continues to be reviewing planning documents and making sure that continues to move forward, as of course our construction sector is critical to the welfare of our economy. With that, I would like to introduce you to the Vice Chair of the Task Force, Foster Williams. He's a veteran of many company turnarounds in Canada, USA, and multiple international assignments in high security places other people do not like to go to. Always working on complex issues and looking to resolve them in a timely fashion to enhance durability, sustainability, and profitability. Trish and Foster moved here in October 2017 and have bought a home in Creekside. They call Collingwood home. By being very involved in local hockey as a team executive, over 50 players, organizers, and for youth lacrosse, and as a hockey referee, he is staying up to date with all the things going on in the community. With that, I pass it over to Foster for an introduction and an update on the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force. Foster?
Thank you very much. Hello, folks. I'm delighted to be here. And on behalf of my teammates, thank you for this important assignment. First slide, it talks about the 3 phases of the crisis. Phase 1 is urgent health crisis, lockdown and disease control. We are seeing an enormous effort by our medical community to address this. And like everybody else, I'm just so happy about their service and what they do. Phase 2, however, is stabilization, getting back to business. And this is our task team's immediate focus. Phase 3, of course, is recovery, open for business, assessing the new business environment, and how to promote Collingwood further. And we see that as our task team's longer term focus. We borrowed this 3-phase approach from the City of Halifax. And as Martin said, one of my whole career experience is really in the turnaround area. And one of the things I like to say to people in turnarounds is there's no magic or miracles. You just need a good plan, good people with high competencies and high commitment, and you must be willing to put in the labor. And what we're finding is not only is this team willing to put in the labor, but we have a strong community around us also willing to put in the labor. Next slide, please. So, purpose and progress. You know, our purpose, our fundamental purpose is to work with you, the folks of Town Council and the community, to improve our resiliency and sustainability of the businesses in our town during and post CV-19. We first got together and introduced ourselves to each other. I'm getting a little feedback. Are you as well? No, okay. We got together, introduced ourselves to each other, and we started to address a few simple questions. And I did that with the group through a survey, and we got immediate feedback, and that helped us to focus where we're at. And I don't know if you can see my hands here, but I like to start at the top. What's our purpose? And then we start to work on the tasks, and we start to drill down, and eventually address the dilemma that we're tackling. The task force has met 3 times and worked independently on some specific action items, which I'll get to in a moment. So we formed very quickly and we got straight into action. And we reached out and had deputations from 16 community organizations and associations assessing their needs. We were honestly astonished by the willingness of people to help, the gratitude for being asked, and to what their needs were. And that is an item we continue to work on. But the thing that impressed me most was the willingness to assist. And I did want to call out one group in particular. The one community, Pastor Daniel Chatham said the following: our group believes the greatest need presently is assisting small businesses to navigate the new reality of reopening. We want to be part of encouraging a Shop in Collingwood first push. However, the first step is assisting those small businesses to reopen to customers. We would like to develop teams which can be called on by businesses to assist them with this process. If that's not generosity, I don't know what is. So we're very grateful for that example, but I will tell you that they all said the same thing. So 3 things emerged. 1, extend existing business support efforts. 2, plan the relaunch of Collingwood's economy. And 3, support social services for a revitalized workforce. Next slide, please. So our initial assessment identified 5 action items, and I will tell you there's been a lot of work done on each one. I'm going to walk you through them, and I'll come back to a couple for points of emphasis. Action item 1 is economic impacts and metrics. The business members of this team, along with others on the team, are all trained in metrics. It's our ability to take a look at a trend line and help us to discern if the actions we are taking are beneficial or if we need to do something else. Regrettably, the data that's available is typically quite dated. So with the help of the BDC and the BIA and the Chamber of Commerce, we think we're going to improve the quality of information so that it's more timely and relevant to the decision-making of Town Council. This will get us away from individual stories and get us focused on mathematical trends, which are absolutely critical to the long-term success. So we're going to build metrics to measure the impacts of CV19 and assess the success and impacts of the recommendations adopted by council. We have an exceptional leader here in John Gillum, and he's organizing the data along with many other community partners and identifying gaps in the metrics that we currently have and investing more in strategic data. This is a very important point. I'm going to come back to it. The second thing is BDC support and recovery services. You know, one of the benefits I've had of being on this team is I've got to know more about some specific people in the community that you call staff and I call subject matter experts and really good guides. And I want to, on behalf of the team, say how impressed we are by Martin, Dean, Adam, Tim Newton, Jillian, Sonia, and support people like Karen Clay and Chris Sargent, just helping me get ready for today. I mean, we haven't worked with anybody that's not as serious and committed as the members of this team. And that's an important thing for a person like me to know, because I like to be surrounded with people who are equally committed and serious about the task. And we've got no passengers on this bus. So just on this point too, we see real opportunity here for the BIA and the Chamber of Commerce to be more proactive in education and outbound calling, to work with their membership to ensure that Collingwood businesses have the best information to access appropriate funds and services. Now, the BDC has been taking care of that. I hope I get all the acronyms correct. And they're working with organizations, but there may be a gap there. There may be people that are being missed, and we want to make sure that all businesses are getting ready now, and we want to utilize the services of those groups and others like the services of One Community and Pastor Daniel to help the businesses get ready. So the status is we're identifying business support needs currently and expanding recovery resources. We're also, I sat in on a wonderful training exercise yesterday by Tim Newton about your digital footprint, if you will, and how to do business online. And they will expand that to safe practices, PPE. You know the drill. It's a very important and critical step to make sure we get ready now. We'll also investigate best practices and new safe and social restrictions in the retail arena. And our colleague Kathy Anderson is leading this, and she's obviously well steeped in the community and an important business person within the BIA and on Main Street. Let me see here. One of the metrics I think of is in this area. I think it would be regrettable if even one business said, I didn't know what I needed to do to get ready. So in the business of safety, we say the only acceptable number of accidents is 0. In the business of getting ready, I think that's our goal. We want 0 people to say, I didn't know what I needed to do to access the support I needed and to get ready to open my door. So that's a metric we're going to shoot for. Next slide, please. Action item 3. We've all learned a great deal, and if we didn't know it already, about the importance of tourism and the business it creates within our community. Well, we discovered, of course, that we have outstanding personnel with a great track record in this area of both promotion and also events, which is the next item. And listening to Dean and Martin and others describe the history of the community's capabilities here was really quite eye-opening. But together with the South Georgian Bay Tourism, develop a marketing plan to relaunch tourism's, the restaurant and the retail sector under the banner of Collingwood Strong. And we'll also expand that to work with local marketing experts, the BDC, I mentioned the South Georgian Tourism, to determine specific promotional plans. This is an important initiative, and it's interesting to watch what other communities are doing in this area. And Brandon Houston, who's leading this item, has done an exceptional job of bringing quality examples to the table for the team to take a look at. Item number 4 is community relaunch events. Our whole notion is, and the ideas that we bring to the table are a series of low cost, high value events that are obviously safe with social distancing. And we love the theme of relaunch. An event, you know, it builds upon the history of the community. And there are so many community interests and community history that needs to be tapped into. And it also provides an opportunity to consider new things that fit into this low cost, high value arena. We've tapped Larry Law to lead this. And we've been, quite frankly, brainstorming a list of ideas that could be produced and promoted safely, and investigating best practices for new social restrictions on events. I believe, having drilled into this with the team, that under Dean's leadership, the community knows what to do and how to do it effectively. They just rely upon a group like us to bring some ideas. But we're in good hands with folks that you would call staff, and I call them subject matter experts. Item number 5, shop local incentive. Now, this was our one significant quality creative idea, and we have to tip our hats to Anthony Griffiths, who brought it to the table and has been it's been fleshed out considerably with the help of Deb Doherty, Brandon Houston, and others. But this is a really dynamic opportunity for us. So we're exploring options on how to provide community residents with in effect, a dollar value coupon to spend within local businesses. And we're collaborating with the treasurer and the economic development team. Now, this is one that's a little more complicated, so we got to drill down into it, and we've got quality staff that will help us build a report to offer to you to make a decision. But this one, I think, has the potential to be a very high emotional contract value item for the cost incurred. All of these items need staff reports and specific actions, and we're working on those right now, and we'll have more to offer you in the days ahead. Next slide, please. And coming out of the 16 interviews we had with the community leaders, one of the things became glaringly obvious to those of us who were listening was the need for a coordinated role to assist with social services. In my language in corporate world, I call it the designated worrier, that point person where everybody knows they're the responsible one. And it's their job to know who all the contacts are and to broker mutually beneficial relationships. So as we say here, the objective is coordinate social service efforts, broker those relationships, and ensure that social services continues to be available to the community, and identify any service gaps and help us to close the gap as efficiently as possible. The status today, we're exploring and coordinating resources, investigating the need for matching financial support programs. Some of these people came to the table requesting some dollars. Some of those dollars are shared dollars within the region. And what we've asked them to do is to come back with a very specific request. And we're working on the collection of those at this time. We did identify one more item, and it all fits under the banner of reducing red tape at all strata of government. And I'm a fortunate person in that I had the opportunity, along with Brandon and Anthony, to serve on the Mayor's Economic Advisory Council before the new year. And I was astonished when I looked back at our 5 initiatives and this 6th one, and thought to myself, this is completely dovetailed in an alignment with the long-term agenda of the community. So that gave me comfort as one of the leaders of this initiative that we're on the right track, short term and long term. We're in nice shape. Could I have slide 6, please? So just to go down to the bottom here, so in the short term, extend business support. We're looking at economic impact with metrics and the BD support and recovery services offered to the business community. On the relaunch economy, we want to make sure that business and tourism has an effective marketing plan in place that advises the community, we're ready, we're open for business, come on in. And the events. And so the events are so important to the community and also our visitors, the tourists that come up to enjoy the four-season paradise that we live in, and shop locally. So getting as much support as we can for our local businesses is critical to our success. And right at the outset, I will tell you that, when we looked at what is our purpose, I won't read you the whole paragraph, but preserving a viable downtown and helping us retain our businesses and jobs. So this is all very, very important to us, and we know the responsibility we have. And social services support, coordinate and assist our social services to optimize the value and service they bring to the community. And that's that for the presentation. There's a couple points I wanted to reinforce. If you just give me a moment. I wanted to come back to action item 1 and 5. These are 2 items where I think it's going to be important to have a much more holistic, detailed report with costing for you, and we will take that on. But I will say items 2, 3, 4, and 6 are really items that were already underway in the community, and all we've done is add additional insight and incentive to the people that work on that to keep it going. So I really think that the energy of all of us needs to shift into 1 and 2. Pardon me, 1 and 5. What else? So I was thinking about your job. What's your job? Your job is you wear 3 hats. 1 is you're our sponsor. You commissioned us. And so thank you for doing that. We're delighted to have the task. Number 2, you're our teammates. Some of you work on the team with us, and others who I haven't met, I look forward to meeting you and being your teammate. And number 3, you're also the key decision makers. So we know our responsibility is to provide you with the information you need to make those decisions. That's it. I'm open for questions, suggestions. You can see the timeline in front of you that we're working to. We're in the process of opening up an email where the public can submit suggestions to the team. We have no beliefs that we are the smartest people in the room. We're more than happy to take suggestions from all town council and all of the members of our precious community. We're looking for constructive, simple, easy to do, good things that are both good short-term and long-term. And always keep in mind that low cost, high value mantra. Standing by.
Thank you very much, Foster, for that great presentation. I will open up now to the floor. Are there questions? Councillor Hamlin, I saw your card up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, Foster, I wanted to express my appreciation and the appreciation of all those in our town for your hard work, your hard thinking, and all the time that you and your task force are investing in serving our community. Really appreciated your report today. I just had a few comments I wanted to add for your consideration, not for anything in particular in terms of obviously decisions today. But earlier this week, our Premier said that the trend in the COVID cases gives us confidence that we're getting close to opening parks and importantly, opening retail. He said initially for curbside pickup. And he said retail should start getting ready now. And I quote, no, he said, no matter if it's 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever it is, start prepping, getting masks ready. So my first comment is in regard to, I feel there have been broad hints from our upper levels of government that wearing masks while shopping will be strongly encouraged and perhaps even mandated as restrictions are lifted. You've probably noticed that one grocer, Longo's, is requiring all shoppers to wear them now. So my first comment is with respect to masks in particular, I'm wondering if your task force could review whether our community has sufficient access to masks for all of our residents and visitors as our town's businesses reopen. And if we do not have sufficient access, consider how those could be sourced. Also with respect to masks, and this would go more into the promotional plan that I'm sure you have no end of good suggestions about. I'm wondering if your task force could review whether it would be a good idea for our town to order reusable cloth masks. And I know there are some out there now that actually have washable filters that fit into them, emblazoned with, for example, the name of our town. In any event, it could be a cheery welcome back to shoppers, especially if they were made available for free. So my second suggestion for your task force consideration involves assistance to our restaurant owners and retailers on our main street. And as restaurants reopen, I believe it's expected that social distancing will be required. And so it will mean many fewer tables for customers of restaurants. And as such, much less chance of making enough money to cover the costs of reopening. And as other small retailers open and they have to maintain social distance, they'll have difficulty perhaps getting enough shoppers. So my question specifically for consideration of the task force is the possibility of closing some of our streets to vehicular traffic, at least during the reopening phase. And this would allow restaurants and small retailers to expand their businesses to the entire width of the sidewalk and allow pedestrians, cyclists, baby carriage pushers, etc., to use the full movement of the roadways. And I know, of course, parking will be lost, but perhaps hand in hand with that, we could be enjoying the wonderfully, being overrun with shoppers. And if we could make the shopping behind here on Ontario Street free, for example, and if we're totally overrun, we could run shuttles from, parking outside our little core. So I appreciate that this probably involves here Ontario south of First Street for a couple of blocks and maybe Second Street, but it may leave, if this idea was to gain any kind of acceptance, other retailers and restaurateurs left out of this program because they're not all located in where we might think of the obvious location. So lastly, I would just ask you to consider in that regard whether there'd be room for some pop-ups for those who would be left without a full sidewalk to use. And those are my comments. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Hamlin. Foster, I don't know if you want to, some of those ideas have been kicking around, but they're excellent suggestions as well. So I don't know if you want to update on the status of any of those or take those back to the task force.
Thank you, Your Worship and Councillor Hamlin. Yes, I believe the Premier was in our meeting one day because we talked about, getting ready now, and soon after he announced it. We really do have to tip our hat to Catherine Giles, who reported within one of our meetings about the impact within the business she's in. And we, of course, had been talking about it, but we realized the urgency, particularly in one thing that you brought up, masks, making sure there's sufficient access for residents and visitors. In the item that we've developed and is being discussed with the BIA and the Chamber of Commerce. That's on the list, making sure that you have sufficient PPE for both your staff and your visitors who may be coming into your business. And obviously, Councillor Hamlin, to dovetail with that is the protocols, how to greet the guest, how to, keep obvious social distancing. I think we're pretty trained in that, but also making sure everybody stays safe. Promotion, order of reusable cloth masks. I love it. Collingwood strong. We could have some fun with that. I don't know what the price tag would be, but I'm a volunteer with the delivery service, and Michelle just told me I don't have a delivery this week. So I'll find out from Michelle, how do we go about buying them and what's it going to cost? It's a great idea. Restaurants on Main Street, close some streets to service. It's been well talked about, and I know that your colleagues are going to be talking to you about it. It's from those of us who, I can only speak for myself as a resident. I love it when I get down there and the area is closed. It attracts me to the area. It doesn't stop me from going to the area. And I think that happens with a lot of folks. And rooms for pop-ups, what a great idea. We've done some exploration about how to use other community lands for events, and just a simple idea, but that baseball diamond over at Central Park is a nice constrained area with a fence around it. So if you want to keep social distancing, how could you use the curve of the outfield to have different shops set up, and then you just get a parade going around and keep your social distancing? So there's been a lot of creative ideas about how to create opportunity for pop-ups of any nature. I will tell you, all those things have been put on the table. I like the fact that you're reinforcing it. So thank you for doing that, and keep the ideas coming.
Oh, thank you so much for your work and comments. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council, other comments? Deputy Mayor? And then I've got you, Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Just prior to going live, Councillor Madigan and I were messaging back and forth, and he was good enough to mention, and I don't know if others have seen, but the Premier today has announced a staggered approach starting May 8th, 9th, and then the 11th, in particular May 11th, that retail with direct access to a frontage of some type or another will be allowed to open up with curbside pickup. And so that's welcome news, I guess, on one front. Tomorrow afternoon, there is a BIA meeting, and I know that as part of that meeting, there will be discussion as to how to, as Foster has indicated, one, work with our business community to ensure that they are prepared to be able to open for operation, ensuring both they themselves as well as those that they're serving, customers, are protected. And I think to Councillor Hamlin's question or comment, and then Foster's response, there has been healthy conversation, and we have a real opportunity, I think, in a positive light, to maybe engage some ideas that, quite frankly, have been kicking around for years within this community. And the idea of closing the street, for example, is one that's documented quite clearly within the original Vision 2020 document. And so I think there is some momentum, and I think it's an opportunity, and hopefully it will allow us to execute on some of these things that will bring vitality back to the downtown when it is most needed. And I should just maybe stress one final point, and to the really, really good work that the task force is doing. There is a lot of conversation around the downtown. And we know that in terms of the small businesses, the service industry, et cetera, that are within the downtown, they play a vital part within their community. But the task force is also ensuring that those who are outside of our downtown are also being looked at and served to ensure that Collingwood comes back strong, not just one part of the community. And I'll leave it at that. Foster, thank you for the presentation, and to all the members, thanks for the great work.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Mr. Williams. Thank you so much for the report that you've presented to us today, or at least the interim report that you've provided. And it's very clear that this group is seeing this crisis as an opportunity, and I like that way of thinking, is that we can chart our own future, be masters, I guess, of our destiny. My question is really about in what form this report that we are expecting to see on May the 19th for discussion, and 25th, I think, for approval, just the specificity that is going to be contained therein. And by that, I mean, like, are we going to hear, who is making the masks? Are we going to hear which streets are to be closed, or if any, and will there be dates and timelines of events and so on that you guys have been discussing? I'm just trying to gauge how much specificity we're going to see in the report that we're expecting on the 19th.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. And I think I might jump in on that one, because it has been a topic for discussion with the task force, and we and I, as a member of the task force, completely appreciate that we are making recommendations to council, and some of those recommendations may need staff involvement to flesh out what those would look like and how they would be implemented. So I think the recommendations that come to council will be fleshed out where we feel confident in certain items, and where they're low cost and we feel low impact and low hanging fruit, with a timeline for implementation. And there may be others like the coupon program, the shop logo program, that will require further research and input, and probably involvement of staff to look at ways that can be implemented given our municipal infrastructure and the mechanisms available to us. So I think there will be a combination. And I think this first presentation, and Foster's done a fantastic job, as has all of the committee, is really to engage council and give us some of the thought processes that are going on, some of the ideas that are being percolated, and so that we're opening the dialogue, essentially, so that we can work collaboratively on that report as it comes forward. So those are my thoughts, and I will pass it over to Foster for additional thoughts he may have.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Councillor McLeod. My thoughts on it are, the business of your business, so do your staff people. We're resources to the staff people who will help us construct what you folks need to make the decisions you folks need to make. We will work as diligently as we can to populate that document with everything you need to make a decision. But we will be guided by your structures and procedures, and we're happy to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think the CAO, Sonia, has something to add to that as well.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to point out a little bit of how staff have been working on this, and to thank Mr. Williams for his praise. We do have some really fantastic people here. What we have been doing is, upon the direction of council to create this task force, many people, Martin in particular, have responded to the questions of the task force, have participated in a number of meetings. And what we've done generally is to try to provide what the task force has asked for. And we continue to be happy to do that, and we understand the priority of these issues for our community. What we're not doing is taking a sort of a balanced view of all the options and providing an opinion on whether option A or option B is the best one to move forward on. And that may not be required. Certainly, if council is satisfied with the material they have in front of them at any given time for a decision, then council is satisfied. But if you specifically want an options analysis, at some point in the future of one of the recommendations of the task force, or want some substantial work done to flesh out a given option, we'd be pleased to do that upon the direction of council. But I just wanted to make a little distinction between the ongoing support, which we're happy to do, and that kind of a more third-party typical report to council that would come forward, in the normal circumstances. I hope that's clear, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Councillor McLeod, any follow-up?
No, I look forward to seeing what comes forward.
Okay.
A lot of forward.
Council, any other questions or comments? I would make one last comment, and that is certainly, and Foster has pointed this out, this is the first report coming to council, but also understanding that we're working with our community and for the community, and that we are looking for suggestions from the public or comments, and they can be sent to dobusiness@collingwood.ca, and we welcome, the committee certainly welcomes any input from the public. And having said that, I think it's a bit of a segue too. I know we have some members of the public with us today, and I've opened the floor for council comments, but I'd like to take this opportunity as well to invite any comments from our public that are watching today. So I'll turn it over to the clerk. Sarah, is there anyone who might be interested in asking a question or making a comment on Foster's presentation?
Certainly, through your worship, we do still have 4 attendees in this meeting, and it doesn't look like we have any requests for comments right now.
Okay, then. Well, if there's no other comments from council, then we'll move on to item 7.2, which is the joint municipal physician retention and recruitment update, and that's from CAO Skinner.
Thank you very much. As you will recall, there was a recent deputation, and it was called the Request for a 2021 Commitment from Collingwood, re the recruitment and retention of family physicians, the Blue Mountains Joint Municipal Physician Retention and Recruitment Committee. That was Councillor Andrea Matrosvis and June Porter. And they had 2 asks of you, of the town, that we appoint a member for their committee, and that we consider 2021 budget consideration for financial support up to $25,000. And those were 2 separate asks. And I was asked, or staff were asked, to follow up and report back on the current physician situation in Collingwood. I was able to correspond with Dr. Harry O'Halloran, and he's the chair of the Family Health Organization here in Collingwood. He provided that we currently have an adequate supply of family doctors, although there are some provincial restrictions on allowing new physicians into our family health organization based on the province's patient enrollment model. So if you use that provincial model, Collingwood would not be considered underserved. Subsequently, his assistant clarified that the province has a number of primary care models, and generally the way that they work is that payments to the physicians are based on the number of patients enrolled, a capitation model, and that when you're within the model, physicians have the ability to refer people to other practitioners within that team, so a diabetic program or a wound care clinic or whatever their needs were. And that there's nothing restricting physicians from coming here and setting up shop. They just simply would be paid on a fee-for-service model instead of under the the currently full family health organization, which would limit that physicians, fee-for-service physicians' capabilities for referrals, but not limit them totally. There's other options. I also corresponded with the Collingwood General and Marine Hospital CEO, Nora Holder, and she indicated that in regards to specialty physicians, the hospital does not have a shortage. However, outside of those inquiries, our staff have been receiving questions over the past months about our residents being able to find a family doctor. And if you look at the family health team's website, it indicates as well that none of the physicians currently in the health team are accepting new patients. So people who are moving here may be finding it difficult to find a family doctor. And this situation does seem to be related, and I'm surmising here, I don't have full proof, that to the province's model about the allowable or optimal number of doctors that are allocated to our region. So I hope that this update has been helpful to aid you in your deliberations about the committee appointment and or the funding that could be allocated in the fall for next year under council's budget deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Are there any questions or comments from council? Councillor Hanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to CAO Skinner. Thank you for doing that research. And it confirms what I had heard, which was, I thought it was stronger than what you said. I thought we weren't, quote, allowed to have any more doctors. But I do totally understand what you said. And I also find it quite puzzling because, you know, I'm sure we all know people who need a family physician and there are none available. So my question is, are you aware of whether there are other communities having the same problem as us, where the model doesn't seem to be working?
CEO Skinner.
Through you, Chair. My research did not cover that. I can only speak from personal experience, having lived in Niagara some time ago, that there was the same situation there. But if it was the requirement of the committee, we could certainly do some more research on that front.
Any follow-up, Councillor Hammond?
No, not at this time. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments, council? So I think what I'd like to propose, I think as I understood the request from Councillor Matrasovs and her colleague, it was really two independent requests. One was for us to consider naming a representative, a council representative for the recruitment committee. And the second was to look at a financial contribution. Then they had an ask of 25,000. I think what I'd like to do, and I've had expression from a council member, Councillor Hamlin, is that we look at appointing a council representative. And I'll look to Clerk Almas, but I guess since it's come up today, what I'd like to do is maybe vote on that at the next council meeting to confirm that, or if anyone else is interested, they'll have time to come forward and put their name in. And then to look at a discussion of any financial contribution as part of our 2021 budget discussions. So to deal with the two separately, but I think we should look at having a council representative on that committee, and Councillor Hamlin has expressed interest. So subject to your comments, Sarah, what would you think would be the best way to proceed in terms of pursuing that?
Certainly, through your worship, to members of council, if there's any other member that does have interest, just let us know before the May 19th council meeting, and we will have a motion on there regarding the appointment to the committee.
Okay, good, thank you. And then I guess before we move on, I will also open that up to the public. If there's any of our residents who are participating in the meeting today, Sarah, if you can look to see if anyone would like to comment on that issue.
It does not appear like there is any further questions regarding this topic.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. So we'll move on then to item 7.3, which is the financial update and timeline recapital projects and efficiencies review. And Treasurer Leonard has prepared a report on that. So I'll turn the floor over to you, Marjorie.
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, we're presenting a short review of our financial position and our capital projects. And I will turn it over to Peggy, who has part one in terms of the capital projects.
Thank you, Treasurer Leonard. Yeah, so I'll just start by giving an update on the capital projects piece of this update. On April 14th, when work restrictions were implemented by the province, town staff began completing a fulsome review of all the planned 2020 projects. So we considered capital, both capital and operating projects, and the value of all of these works totals over $33 million. The project review included a detailed review of the regulation, consideration of project criticality, consideration of our own staff requirements related to the project, and also consideration of project priority. At that time, in mid-April, only critical projects proceeded through procurement and all others were placed on hold. As of May the 4th, provincial restrictions on municipal projects were lifted and all municipal projects are now able to proceed unfettered. Most of these budget items will be put back on track by the departments. There are still some projects that staff have identified as lower on the priority list, or they have potentially already deferred those projects for later implementation. And we wanted to note that from a senior staff level, we felt this was a really valuable exercise for all departments to consider these priorities from a corporate perspective and look at this prioritization based on all the criteria I mentioned earlier. The handout that we provided to council identifies or provides some examples of the projects, some of the projects that fell under the different categorizations. And I thought I'd just speak to that a little bit more. So when we looked at identifying a project as being critical, this included a project that needed to move ahead to protect the health and safety of our residents, or to protect a critical town asset or service, or it might have been an asset that would be classified as potentially failing within 1 to 3 years. So that's some of the criteria we looked at for critical. Under important, these were projects that enable the core business of the municipality to proceed and continue. Also included asset management projects and projects that would be a direct benefit to the public or the economy with respect to economic recovery of our town. And then all other projects fell under the other category, and these we could maybe say are like to have items, and items much lower on the priority list and might include something like an aesthetic project. So that was the update that I was going to provide from the capital projects perspective, and I'll pass the mic back to Treasurer Leonard.
Thank you, Peggy. Maybe before we get into the efficiencies, since it's a slightly different topic, why don't we deal with, if there are any questions dealing with the capital report, let's deal with those now. Council, are there any questions on that? Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Director Slama. I have some questions particularly regarding the Napier Street project. And some of these she has kindly addressed for me in an email exchange yesterday, but I just want to be absolutely sure that I am clear in my head how that all went. So we're definitely going ahead with all of the stuff that we had planned to do, including the Napier Street project. What sorts of things are we doing regarding these projects from a COVID safety point of view? We had this conversation, I think, before, but the contractors are putting plans in place at our request and at our insistence for social distancing while on the job, are they?
Peggy?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor McLeod. That is correct. So for the projects that have proceeded through the tender process in the last month, and this will continue into the future, we did add some increased requirements, such as asking contractors to provide their COVID protocols, so that we have those written down for our town projects, and a contractor can be committed to following through with those. We also extended the validity period of the tender prices for the projects that were issued in the month of April. I would defer to Jocelyn or Rose, a procurement officer, to see if we would continue to do that now that some of these work restrictions have been lifted by the province. And then we had also increased our securities, like our bonding securities. And again, I would defer to the procurement officer if we would continue to do that as we procure projects moving forward this year.
Any follow-up, Councillor McLeod?
I do, thank you. And through you, Your Worship. So am I to understand then that some of these projects are, well, for example, Napier Street, are we right on time then at this point? Like, we're not late putting out the tenders? This was when we were doing it anyway?
Peggy?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor McLeod. Yeah, for the Napier Street project as one in particular, that is right now pretty much on schedule. Yes. So we had procured it in April, and we had identified that if we needed to delay proceeding with the project in May or June, we had provisions in place that we could make that decision. But right now, we're planning to proceed with that project
On the same timeline that we were on originally.
Yes, or very close to it. Yes.
Thank you. And just a couple more questions through you, Your Worship. Are you finding at this point, because I mean, we're not even at the end of the beginning of emerging from all this, so I may be premature in this question, but are we discovering that there is any difficulty procuring materials for the projects at all? Is it I mean, did the concrete plants shut down too? And I mean, obviously the winter, but do you see where I'm kind of going with that kind of question? Are we going to be able to procure what we need to do to make these things happen? Through you, Your Worship.
Through the chair to Councillor McLeod. Right now, we know that some of those services were, I guess I'd use the words on hold in the last month. And I think any kinds of material or service delays would be identified in the early stages of a project. And then managers or project managers can proceed with them as in the best possible way. So right now, we're starting to see services coming back into business.
Excellent. And just one more. This particular project, I'm sorry to harp on Napier Street, but I have residents who are asking me about it. So here's my chance to get answers on their behalf. We're pretty sure that project is going to be buttoned up by snowfall in the fall. Yes.
Yes, through the chair. Yes, that project is scheduled for completion this year.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I'm sure there was a quote from Churchill in there with the end of the beginning, or not the beginning.
Yes.
Of the end, or whatever. So thank you for that historic phrase.
You caught me.
Any council other questions? I'll start with you, Councillor Doherty, and I saw you as well, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. I did have one specific question, but I expect that all of us could have a specific question about a specific project. And I'm wondering if you would be able to provide a list of all of our major capital projects this year, just so that we can get a look at what we can anticipate that will be moving forward and what will not. The project that I was thinking specifically, because it has been a matter of some public discussion lately, is the sidewalk along Huron-Ontario Street. But as I say, we could probably all think of specific projects, and I'm wondering if there is a more fulsome list that I can reference.
I'll pass it on, but it does note in the report that no Collingwood projects are currently undeliverable due to COVID. So it's the question of whether or not they're moving forward, or whether or not there'll be changes in the completion dates.
Yeah.
Okay, so Peggy, are you able to tell us or provide a list, I guess, of the projects that are moving forward? Are there changes in the projected completion dates at this point in time?
To the chair, we didn't look specifically, or I don't know detail on the potential changes to the completion dates of all the projects, but I would expect that, there will be some changes to some of the projects. What, as you have mentioned, with the work restrictions lifted as of this week, all of the town's projects now can proceed. And we do have a list of the projects that are the ones that departments have put into the other category. So I believe we can provide that list to council before the June meeting, where Treasurer Leonard will be providing her full financial update and efficiencies review, if that would be sufficient for council.
Is that what you're looking for, Councillor Doherty?
That would be terrific. Thank you.
Good. All right, that would be great. Peggy, if you can get that together and circulate it, please. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm asking my question in the middle of the two presentations, but my comment would be that I'm very excited to see that we are going to be able to go ahead with projects. And I think the interest of information for the Economic Support and Recovery Task Force will be the ability of the town to create an economic and infrastructure stimulus through these projects and build in job creation and income for businesses within Collingwood with our projects. So I'm very excited about this, but I think that list may also provide us the economic spin-off or the ability that we're going to have in terms of recovery, and also any projects that are going to leverage other orders of government's funding. So I think it's good news that we're going to be able to get on with some of the projects.
Good, thank you. Any other questions or comments, council, before we move on to the efficiencies review? Seeing none, I'll pass it back to you, Marjorie. Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you, Worship. My portion of the presentation is just all numbers, like it usually is, boring and pretty bland. But just to lead off, as of this morning, we had $90,957,000 cash in the bank, and we still have $17.2 million worth of GICs. The preliminary estimates of the lost revenues and decreased expenses this time I provided on a departmental breakdown, and this is based on the best available information on the current state, and I have it's based on what we've had planned on doing within the budget itself. It was a challenging exercise. There were sections I had to refer back to as far back as 2018 to kind of come up with some trending patterns on how to determine them. But we also have to remember that this every day that the situation changes, as the Deputy Mayor mentioned there earlier. They are allowing nurseries and garden centers to open on Friday, hardware stores on Saturday, and the retail with the right security precautions on Monday. So we prepared this. The assumptions that we based it on were that services will start to resume based on the Premier's reopening announcements and continue on in that manner. We have one account that we set up that we're trying to track all of the COVID expenses through, and that's items such as the sanitization of the buses and the bus terminal, sanitizer itself, masks and gloves, and we'll also be adding the plexiglass sneeze guards to all the front counters, and I believe that the buses as well will require that when we get ready to start bringing back the collections. The fares are coming back. If you look at the spreadsheet that I provided, you'll see that the areas of biggest hit are the general government area, where projected over the next 3 months, the loss would be about $178,000. And that's due to the fact that the interest rate has come down so far on our $90 million. The next big hit you'll see is the transit, which is probably about $118,000 in additional cost this year that we weren't planning on. And the final one that is really a big hit is the recreational facilities. And that's part and parcel because the ice at this point in time is still in Eddie Bush. I didn't know that we were going to have another month's relief for the hydro billing, so that could change quite a bit for the next one that we're looking at. And some of the items you can see in parks and the recreation services, which is the pool, are actually probably going to have a minor amounts of savings, but that's due to the layoffs of the part-time staff and the summer seasonal hiring being suspended. The council has provided $1,000 to the 2 high school grocery programs, and we've committed up to $100,000 for the hospital assistance in the backup generator. But I have not accounted for those items in this report. While any loss is undesirable to the residents and taxpayers, the over $36,000 per week in net cost compared to the overall $90 million budget is about 2% of the town's typical weekly expenditures. And that would be based on including the capital projects in those in that spending. On a go-forward basis, I would, for the June meeting, I would hope to provide an updated forecast which will cover the whole year. You know, the accuracy does get better each time as we go along, but it's really, we're dealing in areas that we've never dealt in before. Every day is almost a new beginning. But when I'm doing the June forecast, we're going to base it on the phase recovery decisions of the province, and we'll maintain the assumptions that physical distance will decrease the number of users that can be congregating at any one time, which would impact potentially the PRC user fees more so than any of the others. If the arenas are allowed to reopen, if the pool is allowed to reopen, would we be looking at 25% of users being there? Would it be limited? How would the Clippers have a fair amount of time at the pool? How would they get back to where they are when they have shared dressing rooms, etc.? We will have, we know we're going to have continuing and increased costs, including staffing or contracts for continuous sanitization and disinfection once we open up. We'll have to be always on top of that. We know now that the hydro costs will go back to normal consumption at the 1st of June. And that so far is one of the bigger savings. I believe when I looked at the Eddie Bush Arena, it was about just based on the costs from the off-peak, high peak and mid-peak, just all down to the low peak hours. It was about a $3,000 savings in that 1-2 week period there. We're going to assume that some portion of the park's part-time employees will be brought back for the July to October period. We're going to look at transit services returning to charging fares in September, and the physical distancing for riders would continue. As well, we have the penalty and interest relief for the current year's arrears. And what we would like to suggest is that That's to end at the end of June. We'd like to, staff would recommend we carried it forward until the end of August. At that point, because we have a May 15th due date, if we don't charge penalty and interest on the current amounts until after the August due date, we have essentially deferred their May payment so they can make it all in August. And to continue on, staff will review the budget amounts for all departments to see if there are any significant expenditures that can be adjusted without affecting the services the town is able to offer. For example, I believe there may be a small potential that the $800,000 budgeted for the judicial inquiry will not be fully used. For the first 3 months of the year, we've spent the $305,000, and it's about $102,000 a month. So hopefully it's only going to be another, hopefully a month or two before we get that report. The 2020 budget included a transfer of $1.57 million to the Life Cycle Replacement Reserve Fund, which could be reduced. Residents may have to change their expectations to allow the town to manage the impact. Cost reductions would entail a lower level of service for this year. And as an example, I used once our parks reopened, grass cutting could occur once every several weeks instead of weekly. We're also considering whether we have the in-house capacity to update the BMA financial health report, which would be along the lines of the one that we did get from BMA. We have a bigger study that provides some of that information as well. And we're starting to work on the annual debt report. And again, we're targeting that for the June meeting. The other piece of information that I did provide is the property tax status. And this is just to show us that penalty and interest, that what we should have applied and what was applied runs roughly in that somewhere between $12,000 and $11,000, which is why I think that continuing that support until the end of August would not necessarily, it shouldn't break us, is what I would say. In terms of the pre-authorized payments, to date, we've had 71 people that have dropped out of that. But every day when the tax collector answers emails or phone calls, or we have staff that come into the office, there are more and more people that are signing up for it again. So we've got a net loss of 41 people. And some of those people have actually, we've actually asked to have their payments spread out. They've called and said, can I reduce my amount of pre-authorized payment to cover from now until the end of December rather than missing any? We've allowed them to reduce those payments. We have post-dated checks that were dated May the 1st that went in the bank, and only 5 taxpayers there requested that we didn't cash their May post-dated checks. Mortgage payments that went into the bank, again, $264,000 on the 1st of May. And those don't vary much from year to year. The next two items are the ones that I kind of find a little bit interesting. Total tax payments received and applied for the month of March were $2.3 million. The total tax payments for April of 2020 was almost $2 million. Where we sit at the end of April 2020 is current year arrears of about 9.4 million, and where we sat last year at that period was 11 million. And when you look at those two numbers, the 2020 interim tax bill was $1.1 million higher than the prior years, but yet at this point in time we've collected $2 million more in taxes. Again, even though we have, there is about $2 million less in our arrears at this point in time, we do still have to make the county and school board payments. We can defer them, but they still have to be paid. And they run roughly at $6.4 million per quarter. So while we're ahead, we may be behind significantly. And again, as we say, there have been limited uptake on the deferral of the pre-authorized payment plans, although I think it's still an option for people out there if they want to do that. And when we conclude this, it really truly is too early to understand the full impact of COVID on the town of Collingwood. We do remain with the estimated $36,500 burn rate. And as mentioned, if necessary, nearing the end of the year, the town could reduce the amount of the transfer to the life cycle replacement reserve fund. And but council should be aware that by doing that, there will be long-term effects on our asset management plan. It's the one reserve that we are significantly underfunded, and potential reductions may have future repercussions that we can't determine at this point in time. And that would be my information, Your Worship.
Thank you, Marjorie. Council, questions or comments for staff? Councillor Hamlin?
Thank you. And thank you to our treasurer for that report. I was really looking forward to having some look at, and that was very helpful. I have one comment and one question. My comment is in particular with respect to our landscaping in the town. And I know that we had laid off our seasonal workers because landscaping work was not permitted until this week. And I did hear our treasurer suggest that some of those people could be rehired for July to October. My comment is that I have been thinking that this might be the year to go all out in terms of how our parks look and how many flowers we have everywhere, for a couple of reasons. One is I think a lot of our residents, and older residents in particular, have spent a number of weeks now shut up in their houses, and it would be great for mental health of everyone to go out and see well-tended parks and flowers everywhere. The other thing on my mind is as things start to open, and hopefully by midsummer, we'll be in a position where we'll see visitors return to our town. How great would it be to be able to show a main street that's in full bloom, and even, and I know this is a big thought, but even some of our business areas where we would never put flowers or extra landscaping. It has struck me that maybe we'll have more people driving through these areas, whether they're the Saunders Road area or the area there north, the employment area north of the college, for business potential for the future. And those areas, you know, could use a little spiffing up. So my comment, just to say, is I hope that staff could review the need to bring those staff on well before July to make our outdoor areas sing this year. My question is, I believe through you, Mr. Mayor, to our CAO. As she knows, we are all very conscious of the hardships, financial hardships that many of our residents are experiencing. And it is important that the town be run as efficiently as possible, which I believe is happening. Some municipalities have recently laid off staff. Others have gone to a 4-day work week. And my question then for CEO Skinner is if she could please let council know what steps she has taken to ensure that we're being as efficient as possible with our staff resources. Thank you.
Sonia, go ahead.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair. Yes, we've done quite a bit of work on this with much credit to our department heads and to our head of HR, Melissa.
And there's also been quite a few discussions at the Simcoe County and Muskoka CAOs group around what all the municipalities are doing and a number of the things that other municipalities have put in place. But what we've been doing in particular is that Melissa and her staff set up a skills inventory for staff. Staff have voluntarily contributed their skills so that we found out there was people with interesting things and experiences we didn't know they had. People really do have a large depth of experience and skills here. And we also set up a procedure where if a redeployment need is identified and the department heads prioritize that redeployment need, we will send out that redeployment call to all staff to see if there's people who are interested, as well as looking through the skills database. So to that end, we've been moving staff with the gracious support of the department heads from less busy departments to more busy departments. So there's been some staff who've moved from the recreation programs that we weren't able to deliver in the library to places such as doing sanitation duties in the water and wastewater, water or wastewater plants, to communications to be able to address all the questions from residents on the staff on the public portal, to parks where they're able to do some of the mandatory maintenance that we need to keep doing to keep things safe for people who are still able, for example, to walk on the trails with appropriate physical distancing, and to business continuity and recovery planning. As well, we have laid off almost all of our part-time staff. So that's about 60 individuals who are involved, unfortunately, have been on a furlough or a layoff situation. And we haven't proceeded yet to hire our normal seasonal complement of staff. And the numbers that you saw from Treasurer Leonard a few moments ago show how those decisions have mitigated some of our needs. As well, department heads have been following up in particular with the staff who are working from home to make sure that they still have ongoing valued work to deliver each day. And to some extent, we've been able to catch up on work that couldn't happen otherwise. But in general, people are really working hard just to deal with COVID and to deliver their regular work. I think people don't realize how much of the work of a municipality would continue in a situation like this. I've had residents ask me, why are you going to work? But what they don't understand sometimes is that things like the beautiful water coming out of their tap and the wastewater that's going out of their toilets and the sweeping of the sidewalks to make sure they're not too slippery and many other things are still going on. Even the answering of questions on customer service are still going on, and that staff have some excellent procedures set up for things like being able to access all our files remotely, video conferences, and those kind of things that the residents might not recognize are in place. So forecasting to the end of May, which was in line with what we've heard from the province, we haven't identified any further staff who won't have valued work. I absolutely agree that options such as a 4-day week where people could use a day of vacation or potentially an unpaid day would be preferable to layoffs. We don't want to let any of our really valuable people go, and we think it would be disruptive to our community and to our economy. And we'll keep refreshing our analysis as time goes forward and we learn anything new to make sure that council stays apprised. And thank you for that question.
Thank you, Sonia. Any follow-up, Councillor Hamlin?
No, just to say thank you very much for all the hard work that staff's doing and the analysis we just heard. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. My question through you, Your Worship, is to the Treasurer, and two actually. There was mention of the school board and county levy, and I think $6 million was mentioned, and there was discussion regarding whether that can or is being deferred, and I'm not quite sure I caught. Are we paying those two bills, or are we deferring? Have we decided to defer those bills? Are we hanging on to that money?
Through you, Your Worship, the communications from the county which at this point in time is in a similar situation to where we are, has said we could, quote, short pay and then make it up in the September installment. But I would personally, we have the cash and I would prefer to pay the county because they're our partners in this really. And, you know, we depend on them for a lot of support. We could defer the school boards, but we're going to have to pay the piper someday. So it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
And so through you, or actually through your worship, or to you, your worship, do we need to direct anything to happen here, or do we just leave it in the treasurer's capable hands to make that call? Is that our call or her call?
Well, I might look to the clerk on this. I know at the county level, I'm not sure with the province. I know they granted a similar deferral of the 90 days. I thought the county, the resolution that was passed at the county was that it would mirror the municipalities program. So we offered a 90-day deferral. And to the extent people take advantage of that deferral, the county would recognize that, and that we could pay then whatever we got paid and received, we would then pay the county portion to the county, was the way that was structured. So if there's going to be a departure from that, then I guess I would look to either the CAO or the clerk to tell us whether we need to, council should be considering that decision.
Through your worship, I would ask the CAO if she would like to address that. It's definitely something we can look at.
Okay. Sonia?
This is a very unusual situation. I would think that typically the treasurer would provide those funds to the county, as the county would ask for them to be provided. And I think the mayor has talked about the county providing loose instruction that as you receive funds, please forward them, our portion, on to us. So I think if we use that as a general principle to provide to our treasurer, we could just move forward that way.
Okay. I'm seeing heads nod, so I don't see any objection from council. I've got the deputy mayor, but I'm just going to look to Councillor McLeod. Did you have any follow-up, Councillor McLeod?
I did, and thank you for that answer. And I think that it satisfies me. I think that if what we're doing is fine, and I don't suggest that we need any other direction. I also wanted to ask a question regarding our assessments, because I understand MPAC put off its assessment and for a little while this spring, and I remember that when we reconcile year end and look for our surplus and so on each year. So when can we expect that, or has there been any recent direction or information from the province to our Treasury Department regarding when those numbers might come forward, to give us an even more fulsome idea of how our finances are going?
Through you, your worship, we normally would start receiving, and the difference is now the MPAC has held off the 4-year assessment review. Right. So when you go to do your tax bills next year, they're going to be based on the 2020 assessment values. Yes. But during 2020, there are still properties that will come online for additions to our tax base, which would provide those supplementary taxes. We have not heard anything that would indicate that process is still not going to happen. So of course, we won't really know until we don't usually have runs until August. They start coming in, so we won't have even a feel for where we're going with those until then.
I'm sorry, so we won't know until August?
Probably August. That's usually when they start rolling in.
Okay. Thank you.
Next, I have Deputy Mayor, and then I've got you, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. Just sort of along the lines with Councillor McLeod, and I recognize that this question is really getting into the weeds, but very specifically, because we are in effect the tax collector on behalf of the county and school board. I'm getting a lot of feedback, my apologies. If somebody defaults, are we still bound to pay that portion to the county and to the school board, even though we have not received the funds? So I guess through you to the treasurer.
Marjorie?
Through you, your worship, yes, we are.
Thank
And
you.
then we have, like when we refer to the penalty and interest, we're just not charging it on the current year or our 2020 billings. We are still charging it on the people that have been outstanding for 2 or 3 or 4 years. Actually, we have some of those. So.
Okay. So on that note, then I guess going back to the original question or comment about, paying the upper tier and the count or in the school board, it just would make sense to continue to do so, seeing as that we're obligated regardless.
Through you, your worship, that would be what I would recommend. If we do require a deferral, we can still defer the September school board payments until December 15th, but we have to make December and September at that point in time. If we're having a cash flow problem, we could do that.
Okay.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, and through you to the treasurer, and I guess actually also to Director Culver. I'd like to reiterate Councillor Hamlin's comments relative to maintenance and beautification of our parks. This has been matter under discussion relative just to the BIA area. Originally, there had been some thought that to reduce the expenditure on beautification would help to recapture some funds that may be lost. However, I strongly do believe that generally beautification and maintenance of our parks and public areas will contribute to positive morale for our residents, will make our community more attractive to our visitors, who are a very important part of the economy. They're consistent with our branding. And I think also it will lend a general image of cleanliness and hygiene that will also give people confidence, whether they are residents or visitors to our community. So I feel very strongly that we should move forward with all of that maintenance and beautification. And if there is in fact funds available to enhance, as Councillor Hamlin suggested, I would be one to be very supportive of that kind of investment in our community as well.
Director Culver.
Thank you, Worship. And I apologize for the hat, but it's green, so for a reason. I really appreciate the sentiments that both Councillor Doherty and Councillor Hamlin have mentioned, and I couldn't agree more. I think it's really important, though, that we establish appropriate expectations, because it's now May and we're a month behind onboarding 30 staff. So there are a lot of serious staffing implications, and our season for growing and planting and growing is short right now. I just don't, I agree with everything. I appreciate the support of the department and how council is expressing their value of what we do. But I also just want to make sure that we'll do the best we can, and we'll look at it from an activation perspective. But literally as of Friday, it didn't look like we were going to be able to bring anybody back for the foreseeable future. And it definitely didn't look like we were bringing back before the spring planting season. So adjustment on the fly is a really, really difficult thing with an operation like ours. But we'll take a look at it, and we'll do everything we can to try and meet those ideas that you're discussing.
Thank you, Dean. Any follow-up, Councillor Doherty?
No, thank you. That's all.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from council? Seeing none, before we leave the item, I would look to Sarah, and we'll open it up to the gallery as well if there's any comments or questions from our residents who are watching.
We appear not to have any more attendees watching this meeting in the webinar.
Okay, I don't think our finance department should take that personally, because frankly, this was one of the highlights of the meeting, I think. So moving on then, we don't have, under other business, is there any other business from council? Councillor Jeffrey.
Just a quick question, Mayor Saunderson. I might have missed it, but I didn't see the presentation slides for the task force, and I'm wondering if we'll receive that. If I overlooked it, I apologize, but I cannot find it. I've looked all
Okay.
through them.
Sarah, did we send that out to council?
Certainly, through your worship, to council. It was sent a little bit later after we received it this afternoon.
Okay, maybe if you just resend it to Councillor Jeffrey, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other business, council? Seeing none, we have public delegations. I'm going to pass it again to the clerk, but judging on our last poll of residents watching, we may not have any.
Correct.
Okay. So moving on from that, it was a very productive meeting. Thank you, everyone. And I will look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Jeffrey. Moved by Councillor Jeffrey, all in favor? And we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.